Hello, everybody. Welcome to Optical Dissent with Speckzo and Jordan B. And on this show, we dissent optically. Are you ready to optically dissent, Jordan B?
I think we've been optically dissenting very successfully over the last
When people think of us,
six
they think
videos.
of like, wow, these guys are really good at dissenting optically. But we've been
We're the
doing
best.
videos for like 6 weeks now. Like every week, we've been doing a video. So we decided that we're just gonna name it and continue doing what we've been doing. People seem to like be dissing us about it, about the name. They don't see that it's obviously tongue in cheek. It was originally going to be called Ebony and Ivory. So
That was
obviously
a
we,
little
we
bit
we get
too
the
like
joke.
that
Yeah,
was a
two
little
on the
bit too on
nose.
the head. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly
it
on
was
the
a little
nose.
too on the news. So that's just what we're doing. It's the same thing that we've been doing, but it's just called optical dissent. We get it. We get it's corny. We know we're not retarded. So anyway, all right, what's up? What are we talking about on the first inaugural episode of Optical Dissent with Spexo and Jordan B?
I just want to say thank you for joining me on Optical Descent. Glad to have you as a partner, and you're big timing me a little bit with the green
Absolutely.
screen. That's very,
Production quality. Gotta
very
gotta
good
raise
stuff.
raise the
Very good
stakes.
stuff. Very good stuff.
I'm here in studio,
So we don't have much
penthouse.
time today, and normally I'd have a little bit more prep. But one story that I think really kind of hits home for me, at least, because obviously, I'm I'm Ebony, so I'm a basketball fan, of course. There
Shocker.
is the story about I don't know if people have heard of him or heard this story, but it's about Meyers Leonard. Um, he's a Heat player. He's an NBA forward. He's successful guy, everything like that. NBA Miami Heat player. He was playing Fortnite, being a gamer,
Based.
and he dropped a K bomb. And obviously we can't say it on here because we're going to get banned immediately if we say this, but he dropped a racial slur against the Jewish people. It starts with the letter K, ends with the letter E, rhymes with the word bike. That's all I can really say. And
Knife.
yeah, exactly. He had his entire career destroyed, basically. He was fined, and it's inconsequential to him, but it's $50,000, $50,000 fine, forced diversity and inclusion training,
Based.
public apology.
Naturally.
He
Trip
he
to
basically
Israel.
yeah, exactly. Basically, he went through the Maoist struggle session, more or less, and also he was barred from participating in any basketball activities with his team for the next week. And I'm sure all that time will go unpaid. He's not going to get paid for that time. But and obviously, you look at these things in a microcosm, and it's like, okay, he said a racial slur and he's getting canceled, and that's just PC gone mad. Can't people just? He was just gaming, and it's like that's actually not the point here. The larger point is contrast that with how last year in the NBA playoffs, and Nick, Scott, Jaden, and a few other America Firsters really highlighted what went on here. But I'm a basketball fan, so I really picked up on it. But Luka Doncic, awesome white player, Eastern European slot, like total, like he's just a boss. He's just hoops
Mhm.
against the NBA. He hits a 3-pointer, and another black player calls him a pussy ass white boy
Justified.
to his face. To his face in game, in a playoff game. ESPN picks up on it the whole 9 yards, and they're talking about it. They're having to, you watch in real time how they're having to justify, like, well, I mean, it's bad, but in the heat of the moment, things happen. Nothing happened to him. No public apology. No fine. No struggle session. No Maoist struggle session. Absolutely nothing. He just dapped him up for the next game and said, "Yo, my bad." It's very interesting how in these woke corporations, and I hate even saying that because it's like such an abused term by the right, but these woke corporations, people will stand behind, and LeBron James is a perfect example. They will kneel before the game and act like they're fighting the establishment, when really all this proves Meyers Leonard saying one racial slur, having to basically have his career ruined, versus this guy who says an anti-white slur because it's ostensibly anti-white. He says pussy ass white boy. And that has no impact on his career. Get woke, go broke is a lie. Anti-whiteness is basically more or less funded by the system, and every mainstream corporation backs it. And you can tell that because every Fortune 500 company changes their logo to a rainbow version of their logo every Gay Pride Month. And it feels like every month now, but every Gay Pride Month. anti-whiteness is funded by the establishment. That's my larger point. So not to get hung up on sports ball meme, but I'm just saying that like that's proof that anti-whiteness is funded by the system. And anyone who acts like they're fighting the system by believing the same thing that Burger King and Pepsi believe is lying to you, or they're just evil.
Well, I will respectfully disagree because I think that his punishment is completely justified. I think that he's getting off easy. The Jewish people have suffered for 2,000 years, and no group in the history of mankind has been through the persecution that they faced. And I think that any criticism of them whatsoever should be faced with like immediate death or extreme torture. But no, I talked about this in
you fooled me for a second. I was like, oh, whoa, he's gonna go like uber nuanced and be like, well, actually,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit. Obviously he's going to have to do the whole like apology tour. He's probably going to have to take a trip to Israel, talk to a bunch of rabbis, and then talk about how words affect people, and go to a bunch of Holocaust museums. And then he's probably going to find out that he had Jewish ancestry or something like that, and he's going to really learn from his mistakes and spend the rest of his career talking about how much he's learned and stuff. But it just goes to show that anti-whiteness is mainstream, and it's perfectly fine when anybody criticizes whites. We know that white people, especially white Christians, are the only group that you are allowed to blatantly hate and openly criticize without fear of ostracization or getting fired or any of that stuff. But there's a caste system. So black people, you can see they can get away with, they're the most homophobic demographic ever. Black people, all my black friends are the most homophobic people I've ever met in my entire life. But they could do that. They can get away with it.
Homophobic by colloquial definition.
Oh yeah, obviously homophobia is nonsense, but no,
exactly.
I mean like,
okay, cool.
but yeah, of course, no, but I mean like they're like boomer tier homophobics where they'll just like
like,
drop F-bombs all the time. Yeah,
get that
exactly.
shit away from me.
Yeah, and which is weird because I mean that's a totally another topic. They still will vote for the party who is just promoting globo homo. But anyway, yeah, so but it's a caste system, so obviously Jews are the people you can never criticize in any way whatsoever. And
no, go. Sorry, go for
it's like yeah, so if any black person wants to say cracker or you're a white bitch or even talk about homosexuals or whatever, then that's completely fine. But it seems like it goes like Jews are at the top of the caste system, then black people, and then like gays and trannies and all that stuff, and then white people are all the way at the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it's just a ladder that you basically have to go down, and you're allowed to basically criticize anybody under you, but anybody above you, your career is ruined. And Jews are all the way at the top of that, where Young Pharaoh, Nick Cannon, anybody, no matter what, if you criticize
Malcolm
Jews
X.
As a group, Malcolm X, right? Yeah, exactly.
Literally Malcolm X.
Farrakhan, right? All of these people who criticize Jews are immediately just unpersoned, and that's the last thing that you can do. You can't even describe or talk about Jews as a group that has a collective interest without being destroyed, basically.
Correct.
And I think that's awesome because Jews are just great.
Well, they're our greatest ally, but also it's interesting. I think a point that people don't fully enunciate is that it's not even that you can't criticize Jews. You can't even talk about them as a group collectively.
Exactly.
So another thing, and you've actually touched on this in other videos, or in other times we've talked, but another side point, and it's always funny how it ties back into the people that you would least suspect of having any consciousness of the things that we're talking about, but they do. Mm-hmm. So someone like, again, for our Zoomers out there, 21 Savage, he released a song. LeBron James did a selfie video, put it on his Instagram story, and was rapping along to the line, and he said, "We've been getting that Jewish money. Everything is kosher." Mm-hmm. Within 3 days, LeBron issued a public apology, disavowed his own friend, 21 Savage, and 21 Savage had to issue a public apology to his record label, which I'm sure was owned by. So, and this isn't the that's not what entirely the show is about, but what it's about is identifying the structures of power and acknowledging who you are and are not allowed to criticize. That's an important first step. And like I said, it's not even who you can and can't criticize, groups that you can and can't even name. Like, are we really going to sit here and act like that was a societal mortal sin to say that Jews make money? They would take that as a compliment. That would be like saying black people are good at basketball. Would that require a disavowal now?
Probably now.
Yeah. But I don't even know where that stands. Mm-hmm. But you just have to acknowledge these kind of structural pyramids.
It ties in with like you were kind of talking about corporate hegemony, and it's like that stone stone toss theme meme where, or a comic where it says, "Oh, corporate hegemony says trans rights," and everybody's like, "Oh, wow, that's so awesome and woke and stuff like that." And it's like it seems like this is like a strategy where it ties into neoliberalism, where they're pushing the social Marxism, where they're pandering to the lowest common denominator of all this SJW, ultra liberal, everything is acceptable, all lifestyles are great type of thing. So, and the corporate structure are promoting these ideologies because it's not a threat to the established order, right? It's not a threat to their power. So with this idea of like when people talk about leftist populism and right populism combining together, it'll never happen because there is no such thing as leftist populism, because they are perpetuating the same exact things that the power structure wants to accomplish. They're talking about all of this transgender, multicultural, no racial identity, all this like basically cultural neo-Marxism that they want is the same exact thing that will benefit the elites. So there is no like rising up from the left, like these people like Vosh and Destiny or whatever you want to say. It just doesn't make sense. The only real dissent are people who are calling for like Christian values and homogeny and things of that nature, which is what people like us are.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. I don't even know what their response would be to something to what you just said, because Occupy Wall Street was very quickly co-opted by identity politics, as the right calls it, or whatever you want to call it. You know, it very quickly went from jail the bankers to jail white people. And it did that like very quickly. So it's like if you find yourself on the side of a co-opted movement, you've been co-opted. You are now a part of big business. Burger King, McDonald's, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Nike, you name it. All these, and ironically, all these companies that the right says they use child labor. Do you support that, LeBron? And they try to use these snarky quips, but it's like unironically, they do use child labor and all the things that people like Vosh and Destiny are against. These people are funding your ideology. There's a reason that Destiny and Vosh are not banned from platforms and Nick Fuentes is. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. It's because they don't pose a legitimate threat to the system, and people like you and I do. And that's factual. And you can love me or hate me. Like I've gotten past that. And like you said earlier, you can offer any criticisms you want of the name of our show or something, but I guarantee you we will be banned much quicker than Vosh and Destiny will. And we sure as hell won't get Twitch sponsorships or anything like that. So it's ridiculous to think that they're fighting some oppressive system when they're making bukus of cash and we're over here, people on our side can't bank,
Vosh just trying to justify why it's okay for people to own child porn, and that he's sponsored by like YouTube and Google and making thousands of dollars. And H3H3 is like saying, "Oh, I'm ready for you to radicalize me," and all this stuff. Like you're supposed to be like, "Oh yeah, he's a radical, but he's still sponsored by all mainstream corporations." And what was I going to say? Oh, so I don't know how to properly articulate this, and I could be way off, but I have this sort of like foundation of a theory that I have, right? So I feel like for the last 150 years or something, the elites and the powers that be have obviously been trying to push to this new world order where it'll basically be a world government, centralized, obviously, where they rule over a submissive coalition of low IQ, mixed race, mixed culture nations that don't have any identity and can't really fight, collectivize to fight
amalgamation
back.
of
Right. So I feel like both capitalism and communism are two sides of the same coin that have been trying to push the ball in that direction to attain that new world order. And then I feel like when the Soviet Union collapsed in like 1991, they kind of realized that, okay, well, straight up communism isn't really getting us where we want to be, and straight up international capitalism isn't getting there. So they kind of combined it into like this neoliberal cultural Marxist but ultra corporate capitalism, but consolidated corporations having that power structure in order to push that goal. So now it's like a combination of both communism and ultra capitalism. That's like, obviously I can't articulate it that well, but I feel like that's like a working theory where they basically combine the worst parts of both terrible ideologies to basically accelerate towards the new world order.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you look at what the mainstream talking heads and like the mainstream ideology coming from both parties in America, at least because we have a two-party system, the talking heads and the talking points from each party accelerates each of those worldviews. So you have people like Ben Shapiro advocating for mass capitalism. You have people on the left advocating basically for mass capitalism plus identity politics. you're pushing both of those things in an opposite, like, pincer direction against probably the working class, but at the end of the day, it's basically anti-white, because on the right, if you're importing cheap labor that disenfranchises white people from the jobs that they were able to make a living on, 60 years ago, you have that on the right. And then on the left, it's like, you have straight on South Africa, we're going to take your farm and kill your family type stuff. So
I'm sure it'll get there eventually anyway, like regardless.
It's really, yeah, exactly.
We're
It's
on the
really
cusp
just
of that.
It's just creating a pincer movement in the middle, like against the people in the middle. And again, this point is kind of, it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but that's what the Great Reset is. It's the absolute dissemination of the middle class. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
I think Nick said
Or
it. He said it's
not dissemination, decimation. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like Nick said. It was like the poor and the ultra rich are working to just destroy the middle class. That's what it seems like, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, actually, I think that's exactly where I wanted the convo to go, because I didn't. That Meyers Leonard thing, the Miami Heat thing, that's a microcosm of a much larger issue. But I thought it highlighted really well how you can't even talk about this group. You can't say anything now,
unless it's absolute praise.
Yeah, unless it's like you are, like, you're Trump, who is like not even religious.
I love the Jewish people. They have saved America from everything, which I totally agree with.
He's in front of the Western Wall, like gyrating his body or something, whatever they do there, and it's unfair, and it creates an unhealthy environment for the Jewish people to be able to create arguments against true anti-Semitism. So that's what I would say.
I mean, if you keep banning and calling people the epitome of evil just for having any type of criticism whatsoever, then that might cause some actual radical people to really hate a specific group. Not saying that it's justified, but that's what happens if you don't let people talk about certain things.
Yeah, when you don't let people talk, they feel as if they don't have a voice. This is common sense. This doesn't even apply to just that group or anything. This is common sense. When you don't let people voice their concerns, they start to worry about the people who are asking or who are mandating that they stop voicing those concerns. It's a completely legitimate feeling to have.
And it's another arbitrary pejorative. Obviously, it's just it's trickery. It's trickery to silence dissent, just like racism and all these other terms have become. What does anti-Semitism mean? Well, if it means like you have blanket hatred for Jews, then no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I think most people aren't, but that's not what it means. If you look at like
we love Kyle Frank.
Yeah, they what's it called? If you look at people on like the SPLC or the ADL, the definitions that they have of anti-Semitism, it's like criticism of Israel. If you like mention anything whatsoever about Judaism, if you say Judaism is an illegitimate religion, you're anti-Semite. You're an anti-Semite. If you're a Christian, you can't think any other religion is legitimate, or else then what's the point of being Christian? You think the only religion, the true religion, is Christianity. So basically by default, they're saying that all Christians are anti-Semites. So, okay, so how is that a bad thing then? Like, I'm saying, like, you can't have a definitive version of the word you're trying to call us or whatever. So it's meaningless.
Well, yeah. And like you just said, it's the same thing with the term racism. I mean, it's kind of belabored at this point because we talk about it every video, but I think it's important to nail it home. Yeah. It's the same thing with racism. It's like, that's what I tweeted this earlier. I was at a sports memorabilia show. That's why I didn't have time to prep, but, I was talking with some boomers and some Gen Xers today, and we got onto politics. They've heard of Nick Fuentes. They know who he is. They just think that he's problematic. Incredibly based. You'd be surprised. And their whole problem was that Nick is a racist, quote unquote. And I asked them, and they were talking about Candace Owens also. And I said, here's the problem with someone like Candace Owens. And we've talked about this, but I said, you have to the pushback automatically inherently should be, what are you defining as racism? Are you defining it as some blanket hatred towards a group? I don't think they are. They probably think that that's what Nick is, and I'm over here advocating for AFPAC and Nick and the whole crew. And you really have to break down the definitions at a base level, like you just said, anti-Semitism, racism. You can't play into their framework. And of course they love Candace Owens, and they think that she disproves everything that the left calls Nick. And it's like, dude, they call Candace the same things they call Nick, and they just ignore her skin color. Like
Yeah.
they just they don't care. They hate you. They want you to die. So
Yeah. Well, that's what it
was
is.
trying to get it
Go
across to the
ahead.
boomers today. No, I was trying to get it across to the boomers today, but hopefully it hit
Yeah.
home.
Yeah, that's what it is. Like, obviously, we know that it's mainly anti-white and anti-Christian stuff like that, but it's also anybody who aligns themselves with anybody who acknowledges white people as a group with interests. So they'll call people who's even boomer tier, like Candace Owens or even Kanye West, just for supporting Trump. As soon as black people go against the grain and they stop doing what the establishment wants and hating white people, and even considering that white people may have legitimate grievances and a desire to have group interest and fight for like a collective or whatever, if anybody who's non-white even suggests that, then they become Uncle Toms or whatever the case may be, and they become enemies of the establishments as well. So while it is at the base level a racial thing, it's also an ideological war, because anybody
Correct.
who's non-white who defends white people also
Correct.
becomes an enemy.
I was listening to John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry the other day. I've mentioned them on the show before. Glenn Lowry, he's an economist. He's a professor at Brown, I believe. He had a good point. He said that even Thomas Sowell during his day in the 70s, when he's giving all these base talks that we love, and I like Thomas Sowell, he's a brilliant economist. The thing is that even in his time, he was considered an Uncle Tom in the 70s. Mm-hmm. Because he was not going along with the progressive Martin Luther King, Black Power. It's the white man that's keeping us down. When Thomas Sowell was in the 70s and 80s on talk shows talking about libertarianism and about how black people did better in the 40s and 50s than they did post Civil Rights Act of 64, he was not beloved in the black community. He was called an Uncle Tom, and that's Thomas Sowell, and we consider him mild now. Wait until you get a truly based person, and you see shades of that with people like Malcolm X, and it's just interesting to me. Anyone who's heterodox, race aside, anyone who's heterodox, Nick, Malcolm X to Nick to Thomas Sowell, you name it, you will be persecuted. It's interesting.
It seems like the Overton window, which the Overton window is basically there's a thing of acceptable thoughts. From here to here, you have acceptable thought, and you can argue within that acceptable frame. But as soon as you go out on either side, then you are a dissenter or whatever. And it seems like the Overton window has just gotten progressively smaller and smaller. And now it's whatever the establishment says, right? Which is just this radical neoliberal everything, right? That's the only acceptable frame of thought. And anybody outside of that, even just a tiny bit, even from normicons to libertarians to boomers to whatever, are considered radicals. They put like libertarians, like the fucking Proud Boys, in the same category with like George Lincoln Rockwell. You know what I'm saying? Like they put, like, it's insane. They called Donald Trump a racist and a fascist before his presidency and his entire presidency or whatever. And it just goes to show that the establishment wants complete control over everybody's framework of mind, right? But on the other hand, what's good is that Donald Trump was still elected. They tried everything in the book to slander him and to try and unperson him, basically, and he still won. Now, of course, you can say, well, he's a billionaire and he has all this money and he could do that and he can get away with stuff like that.
That doesn't cut it for me.
Exactly, 100%, because it's showing that normal people are not being completely trusting of the institutions anymore. It's showing that people are starting to at least semi-think for themselves. Even with this whole Q thing, which I'm not a Q person, I think Q is absolutely silly goose nonsense, but the fact that so many people were willing to like look into it and do research and like think for themselves, even though everybody was saying, even the media was saying how they're crazy racist conspiracy theorists, shows that people are starting to not trust the institutions of power.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably, a lot of people memed about this, and they said, and it rightfully so, they said, well, what about whenever a Supreme Court justice does something horrible that Trump appointed, what's her name? Amy Coney Barrett. She does something stupid, and people say, well, what about those Supreme Court justices, Trump? That's a totally legitimate critique. Like, I agree. It's like, that was dumb, to get on the memes of Amy Coney Barrett or whatever. But the big thing that Trump did that's long lasting, that you really cannot sign out of law or like ever overturn or anything like that, is the distrust in the institutions. The media showed their ass. The media totally played their hand. or overplayed their hand. The university system overplayed their hand by banning people and expelling students who are explicitly pro-Trump. Everything like that. It's total distrust in the institutions at every level, from the military to the media to academia to film to Hollywood. I mean, at every level, distrust has been sown. And I mean, rightfully so. It really took someone like Trump to take the mask off. So if nothing else, that's the long lasting thing that I really think people have to think about, that he did, that cannot be undone, I guess. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I talked a little bit about this in my first episode of Pray and Prepare with Speckzo, my other podcast.
Let's
what's
go.
it called? That Trump, despite his ineffectiveness and the things that you can criticize him about, I know for me, he led me to further dissident politics. He led me on a path that eventually led me back to Jesus Christ, and him being the foundation, not him as himself, but him being the foundation of the starting point, is what led me to change my life and like become a person who had aspirations and goals to get a family, start a family, dedicate myself to Jesus Christ, and trying to do my part to try and actually make America a better place again. And that's all because of Donald Trump. And if he had that effect on me, regardless of his political effectiveness, I think he had to have that effect on at least a few million people, you know? So exactly. I'll forever be grateful and always love Trump just for that fact.
Well, yeah, with no Trump, you really, for me at least, I wouldn't have been exposed or noticed a lot of the evil in the world. Absolutely. If there was no Trump. Trump made a lot of people, friends and family members included, they showed their hand while Trump was in office. And I saw the things that they value. It's so funny to really look at it. And, you know, you see Trump back an anti-abortion bill or something along those lines. And you watch people viscerally react to the idea that abortions could be restricted. And they say, no, I want to kill my kid until the last day. And it's like, man, you're disgusting. You're really gross that's the hill that you're willing to die on. He exposed a lot of people in my everyday life. And I mean, celebrities really outdid themselves on this one.
Yeah,
they outdid themselves on a totally different level. But I mean, like on a very one-on-one level, coworkers, friends, family, there were people that were upset that their abortion access could be restricted. And I know that like on the right, we know that people get upset about that, and we think that that's just wacky liberals going crazy. But it's like, no. You are really mad that Trump is restricting something like that, or anything that any good that he did, that they could justify themselves to be angry at. They did it. Yeah. And it's just a total inversion of goodness, truly.
I actually never really expressed this before, but you just made me think about it. Before Trump, there were celebrities that I liked and celebrities that I didn't like. If like people like Sean Penn, who were like ultra liberal, and he was like shaking hands with Chappelle, and I was like, oh, this libtard, and Alec Baldwin and all this stuff or whatever. But once Trump came into the picture and all of these celebrities just started exposing themselves for the evil, vile, disgusting leftists that they are, now even people that seem to be good, like even like who's that guy that's he's like in the Marvel movies, Chris Pratt, he's invoking Jesus Christ's name and stuff like that, which is fantastic. And don't get me wrong, and even people like Clint Eastwood and stuff like that, who might be, and Mel Gibson, you know, I think Mel Gibson might be like the exception. He might be one of the good ones. But now every person that I see that's involved in Hollywood or famous, I think like you had to sacrifice babies to Moloch.
Exactly. Like I hate
into position.
I feel like I'm like down the rabbit hole at this point, but it's like, you're right. Like at this point, if you're on TV, I almost assume that you had to do something horrible to get there. Yeah. And it really shows because of how many, the ubiquitous response to Trump's presidency. It wasn't
a synchronization. It was
they were literally all saying the same things at once. You know, talk about free black man talking. Let's go Dave Chappelle mode. What did Dave Chappelle do? Dave, wait, we may have a disagreement here. But this could be interesting. So the backstory behind Chappelle is that he was offered back in
$10 million, $80 million?
50. It was 50. And this was mid 2000s. And that was a lot of money back then. And you know, that was more money than it is now.
I take 50 million now.
Yeah, exactly.
Even with inflation, I would take 50 million.
Exactly. He had the most successful TV show. You could basically the most successful skit show of all time.
It's one of my favorite, still one of my favorite TV shows.
Oh, Clayton Bigsby.
Clayton Bigsby.
Chappelle had the most successful show of all time, you could probably argue. There's rumors that they wanted to do certain things, the ritualistic things that we're talking about. Turned it down, moved to Africa for 10 years. Did interviews saying that he, after he came back, saying that he just wanted no part of Hollywood. Read into that what you will.
Well, let me interrupt real quick. The thing that he said on the Oprah interview,
the blue dress.
I don't know when he. Well,
Okay.
what I'm talking about is that he said that he felt when he was making racial jokes that white people were laughing for the wrong reasons.
Okay. Interesting. I don't think he meant white people. Mm-hmm. I think he was probably referring to another group that co-ops that thing.
Gotcha.
I'll stop it there. But so he comes back 10 years later and he does one stand-up show or a performance at SNL about 2 weeks after Trump got elected. He does a performance. He says the line that he got most criticized for was,
give him a chance, right?
Let's give Trump a chance. The left bombards him, jumps on him, calls him an Uncle Tom, a racist. He comes back now, or he does another show 2 years after that, I think in 2019. Anti-Trump, anti-white. I mean, it's across the board. It's a totally leftist friendly.
But he made fun of Jussie Smollett, so he's based.
Yeah, but based because Dave Rubin quote tweeted him and said, "Oh well," he said, "Juicy Smollett," and it's like that proves the mob mentality of Hollywood, and it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, but it does take a noticing person to say, "Hey, isn't every structure that I listen to and obey, isn't it kind of geared against right-wing people, Christians? And if you really break it down, Christian white men in middle America, when you really break it down, it's interesting because if someone like Chappelle can be turned into a groveling fool like that after being a free thinker and turning down 50 mil, then what does that say about you, liberal libtard? Yeah.
It also shows how far left we've come, because a show like the Chappelle Show would probably never be allowed on right now with the racial jokes that they had constantly. It was all racial jokes, right?
It was,
and
it was funny. It was funny at the expense of all races, like the racial draft episode. That's a classic. Great. That's a classic. Yeah. He made fun of black people when he talked about the reparations episode.
Yeah, what I say, like KFC went out of business or something like that.
No, KFC's stock went through the roof, and there have been 500,000 new record labels started up in the last 4 hours. It's like that's funny. Like that's objectively.
Yeah, now
funny.
you can't joke like this. Actually, there's this movie Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood, and they go into the barber, and it's like an Irish guy and a Polak, and he's like, "Oh, what's up, you potato eating Mick?" And he's like, "Oh, what's up, you retarded Polak?" and stuff like that. But it's like bands, they're friends, they're like best friends, but they fuck with each other. You know what I'm saying? Now you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? Now that's how a lot of people are, and that's how I was with a lot of my friends, even my black friends. You know, they would say, I can't repeat what I said and what they said, but like whatever. But like it was, it's not meant to be like, oh, I'm trying to hurt you, I'm trying to do it in a disrespectful way. It's like it's banter between friends, how you make fun of each other, and race was not something that is off limits. Now it completely is. And then you see that Dave Chappelle, who had this humor, and then he had the balls to turn down $50 million for whatever the reason is. Doing that for whatever your reason is, turning down that much money or whatever, it takes some type of courage, right? To go against the media like that or whatever, even if it was just for like I really don't think that it was for like a sensational purpose or like for shock or whatever, because he didn't come back. He didn't come back into the mainstream for like 10 years after that, right? Then he comes back and he does a bunch of comedy stuff, and it's awesome. Dave Chappelle is back. He's controversial, all this stuff. Then what happens when, besides the Trump stuff, what happens when George Floyd dies?
He does a skit called 826 or whatever. 846. Yeah, and exactly.
For an hour long, I know. It wasn't a comedy show. It was just him ranting CNN talking points about how racist America is, and talking about how Candace Owens is horrible and all of this nonsense. When like it's like, okay, if there was a situation where there's a cop on camera, like, and he's like, I'm gonna go and kill some black people today, right? And he comes out and he starts like shooting black people or whatever, then I'd be like, okay, maybe there's some, like, you could talk about how like that's not cool to do that. But all of the evidence shows that George Floyd, it doesn't exist, obviously, but all of the evidence,
no, I know, you know that.
All of the evidence shows that this whole George Floyd nonsense is so easily shown. I don't even understand how there's a fucking trial, honestly, because it shows He did not. The fucking autopsy showed that him putting his knee on his neck, which is an Israeli move, by the way, that our police are taught from by
they learned
Israel.
that from or not Mossad, the
IDF, yeah.
IDF, yeah.
Right, yeah. That was not a contributing factor to his death. He overdosed on a mixture of fentanyl and I think meth or cocaine or something like that, because he probably swallowed it when he saw the cops rolling up, because you could see the white stuff on his tongue in that video. They like slowed it down and stuff like that. And he was saying he can't breathe before he was even on the floor. And he was resisting arrest. He's also not a good guy. He's an amateur porn star who robbed pregnant women at gunpoint. All of this stuff, we know this, but it's just they need to push this narrative. They need to enrage people, and people like Dave Chappelle, who have these positions of influence through the media, are just perpetuating the lie. That's all they are. They are children of the lie, like Jesse Lee Peterson. Jesse Lee, what's his name? That's his name, right?
Lee Peterson,
Jesse Lee Peterson. Yep, that's just like what he says.
Amazing, exactly.
Amazing. And that's one thing I wanted to touch on. I did that Andrew Klavan analysis video, which is like the most viewed video on my channel, right? And where he was like saying like, oh, Nick Fuentes said that what's it called? Jim Crow wasn't that bad and stuff like that, and it's like, okay. And then you were saying, oh, but his ideas aren't worth mentioning. But you have talked with Jesse Lee Peterson, who has said the same exact thing, probably even more extreme than Nick Fuentes has said about the Jim Crow era. He said that growing up in Jim Crow was the best experience of his life, and that he recommends, I don't agree with this, but this is what he said. He said that he recommends that all black people should pick cotton once in their life. Jesse Lee Peterson, a black man said that.
Hey, JLP said it, so I can't I can't refute it too much. But I mean, the thing is that it's really about how they want to frame it, because the thing is that Thomas Sowell didn't say things too dissimilar from what JLP or Nick Fuentes has said. Thomas Sowell, respected economist, respected libertarian economist, has said in his book, Basic Economics, that the quality of life was better pre-1964 Civil Rights Act than it was after. What's the difference between JLP saying it and Thomas Sowell saying, oh, it's because you don't like the person who they associate with? It's so disgusting.
Yeah. Look at Larry Elder. Larry Elder.
Well, actually, yeah, that's it. Yeah, go for it. But yeah, no, Larry Elder was the other one I was thinking of.
He always even with the George Floyd thing, I actually like Larry Elder a lot. He always talks about FBI crime statistics. He talks about like every time a black guy gets killed by cops and the media sensationalize it, he's always like, we don't have a police brutality problem. We have a black criminality problem. Look at the statistics, right? He goes 1350 mode all the time, right? And this is a black political guy, and he's just like swept under the rug. Like nothing matters. Like nobody listens to him, but he's great.
Right. Yeah, Larry Elder is awesome. He's a little bit too tied in with the Daily Wire crowd, if you will.
Is he? I don't know really too much about him. I just know that I've seen him drop 1350.
He's a war hawk. I'll put it that way.
Oh, but neocon?
Yeah, he's a neocon when it comes to that kind of stuff. But and as far as racial issues, he's based. He understands. But yeah, no, it's wild how they'll just disregard people if they're not the right skin tone. But it's not surprising that, what I was going to say was really the one that woke me up, the police shooting that gave me a good foundation to argue against leftists on, is, do you remember that kid in Arizona who got gunned down by the white cop? It was a white cop shot by a white guy, or a white guy shot by a white cop.
Oh, was that Arizona? The video?
In the hallway. The hallway video.
That's such a fucked up video.
That video, like, it was chilling to watch. Yeah. And I've seen ultra violence before. That's not the point. I understand violence. I get that. I'm saying that the fact that this guy was literally begging for his life from the minute that he got out and was crawling and clearly posed no threat. Like, he didn't have a gun. There was nothing there. And he was trying to pull up his pants while
he was drunk. Yeah, he was drunk. And they were yelling out directions that just kept contradicting each other.
They said, put your hands up, down at one point. And he didn't know what to do. And they said that was one example of him refusing to obey their orders. And when they gunned him down, I was like, oh, well, naively, I said, surely this will cause a national outcry about maybe not about racial police dynamics, but maybe we can move the conversation further from it being about racial police dynamics to just basically DMV assholes with guns abusing their power. And that didn't happen. It never happened. But instead what we got was a summer of every city burned to the fucking ground because another black criminal got killed after they didn't obey orders.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
you
like,
saw
it's so disgusting. It's so inverted. It's an inversion.
all you saw with that video was like boomers saying, "See, it's not just black people who get killed by cops. See, we're in this together." Like, it's like,
No.
bro, it's like, okay, yeah, and then you just go on about your life and stuff like that. But anytime that a black person gets killed or whatever, there's riots and stuff like that. And I'm not advocating for violence
No,
and stuff like
yeah.
that. But it's like you do nothing. You're like, oh, look, we get screwed by the system too. Look, our people are getting murdered too. What the hell? It's you can't be burning down your cities because we're all in this together. We should just accept our positions. It's like, bro, at least they're like, even though, look, even though what they're doing, what Black Lives Matter doing is disgusting. They're burning down cities. They're not really a threat to the system. That they benefit the system, of course. And most people involved in the riots are just opportunists. They're not really doing it for any type of reason. But the fact that they're willing to actually do something because they think that they are making a difference, even though they're not, even though they're on the complete wrong side, the fact that they're willing to actually do something is a tiny bit respectful compared to the white boomer conservatives who are like, look at these crazy hypocrites burning down cities. That's not going to help black people. It's like, okay, fuck you. I'm going to go rob a sneaker store now.
Yeah. Yeah. They just killed my son. Could you imagine if they killed my wife? How crazy is this? Like, yeah, exactly.
The perfect example is with Cannon Hinnon, the little white boy who got killed by the black criminal next door, or whatever. And what was the response from the parents? It's like, he didn't see color.
Oh.
We didn't think about that. That was the most enraging moment of like the last year for me.
I'll call you on that. Molly Tibbetts' parents was more enraging. Her father, Molly Tibbetts, was the one in Midwestern Idaho, or I forgot exactly where she lived. Idaho, 20-year-old girl, murdered by an illegal immigrant who worked on her father's farm. Their family has to come out and say, no. This was during Trump, he said. Her father comes out after her case became one of like a Canon Hinton type case where the right is like obvious example. Her father comes out and says, no. This is a multicultural town. We are not anti-legal immigration. We have tons of legal immigrants. We love Hispanics. Like we love them. And dude, your daughter literally just got raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant. And the thought of being called a racist that's what
offends you.
The concept of being labeled a racist family, that's what you care about more than your daughter's coffin.
And there's people that like believe this, like on the left, and even some like normicons, like where if like a quote unquote racist is brutally murdered or something like that, that's justification for their death. If even though we hate Richard Spencer, right? Richard Spencer is a cringe cock, probably a federal agent. Fuck Richard Spencer. But when he got punched in the face or whatever, and they were like, oh, it's okay to punch Nazis or whatever, and it's like, so you're justifying violence to somebody that has ideological disagreements with you. So violence is perfectly fine as long as it's people that you are on the opposite sides with. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, so when you're labeled a racist or you're labeled these terms that ultimately mean nothing, then what you're saying is you're dehumanizing those persons and you're justifying any violence towards those people. And instead of conservatives fighting back and like using the same tactics and actually doing something and being real reactionaries, they're just like, oh, look how mean these people are. Look how crazy they are. Meanwhile, they sit back and do nothing while people just get punched in the face and murdered for being perceived racists.
Yeah, I mean, what would Con Inc.'s argument be against Richard Spencer getting punched in the face? Yeah. You know, if you're Ben Shapiro and you label everyone you don't like an anti-Semite, you can do that all day. What's your argument against Richard Spencer being punched in the face?
Right.
Then why does he not deserve to be punched in the face, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
You know, according to his logic, Richard Spencer is the worst thing you can be. So then he needs to get punched in the face. And then that means Nick needs to get punched in the face. And that means I need to get punched in the face. Ostensibly, you need to get punched in the face. Mm-hmm. So where does it, and again, this isn't groundbreaking, but it's like, where does it stop? Like everyone to the right of Ben Shapiro needs to get punched in the face.
Yeah, right. Well,
Great society.
Ben Shapiro is a complete and utter hypocrite because he tries to be like one of these free speech warriors, but as soon as you say something that goes against the grain, he'll label you an anti-Semite, and then he'll do things where he won't allow his people that he associates with to associate with you, and he'll slander you in his paper and stuff like that. And then once you get banned or whatever, he'll be like, "Well, I thought he was despicable, but I think it's wrong that he's getting banned." It's like, well, you actually helped him get banned. You actually helped these things happen, and it's like you're calling these people anti-Semites, right? And to you, anti-Semite is the worst thing in the world because it goes in steps. If you're an anti-Semite, that means that could lead to another Third Reich, and that could lead to another Holocaust, and that was the worst thing that ever happened in the world. And so if you're an anti-Semite, you're no better than that, and you deserve to die because you're the epitome of evil. That's basically what you're saying when you throw these arbitrarily labels at people.
Exactly. And actually, now that you brought up Ben Shapiro, I forgot about one of the connecting points that tied into the NBA thing. I hate to bring it back to this, but Ben Shapiro actually ties into this thing. So Ben Shapiro quote tweeted one of like an ESPN article about Meyers Leonard getting suspended or whatever. Ben Shapiro quote tweets it and says, the story I was talking about earlier, the LeBron James, where he's quoting where he's rapping along to the anti-Semitic line saying that, Jews have a lot of net worth or have a high net worth. Shapiro quote tweets the ESPN tweet saying that Meyers Leonard was suspended. Shapiro quote tweets it and says, I seem to remember LeBron James not getting suspended when he did his anti-Semitic thing on. And I was like, but that blew my mind because it was like, dude, one, he didn't say anything anti-Semitic, even if that's a term that you definitionally agree with. Two, he didn't do anything anti-Semitic. Two, you're assuming that anti-Semitism, whatever that means, deserves being banned or something like that. Like free speech deserves banning or something. At what point do you agree with free speech, Ben? It was
also,
it's
he's
totally,
singing a lyric. He's singing a lyric to a song.
It's not even a slur. It's a compliment, and those weren't even his words. Those were a rapper's words. So it's just like Ben will agree with banning for literally everyone, basically. And he'll put up these mealy-mouthed talking points from a conning point of view, saying, well, remember when this guy didn't get banned? And it's like, well, what did he say? Yeah. Like he'll never get to that point. And the larger point on this is like Shapiro needs to be taken out as a middle ground between boomer cons and naturally conservative people and true neo-reactionary thought. Yeah. Because he's a stopgap right there. I used to
think he was a pipeline because I kind of used him as a pipeline because I was into Ben Shapiro back in the day or whatever. And maybe at first he was, but now
he's turned into a stopping point for boomers.
Exactly. That's what he's turned into. Exactly. And what I was going to say is like this guy, Luca, or whoever, no, not Luca, whoever the guy is, Meyers, that said
Leonard Meyers.
Yeah, that said the anti-Semitic thing. He was playing a video game. Now, he shouldn't have been streaming. He also should have had the fortitude to understand that he is an NBA player and shouldn't risk his career like that. But also, when you're playing video games, right, do you think this guy even has the IQ to understand the implications of the words that he's using? Or do you think that he's just trying to, in the heat of the moment, use any terms that could offend or just like blast your enemies? Because when you're in, I don't know how many people have played fucking Call of Duty on Xbox and been in the Modern Warfare 2 lobbies where you're talking about like raping each other's mothers and just saying
the lobbies are insane. Shit.
Like these exactly. You say the most disgusting shit. You know what I'm saying? So it's just fucking like you think that he's like trying to like invoke like the next Hitler by fucking saying
he's like rubbing his hands together.
He's like, oh, I'm gonna drop the K-bomb, and then somebody's gonna be like, what does that mean? And they're gonna Google and they're gonna find
you know what I'm saying? Like next thing you know, they're reading Evola. What's funny, side point, we can move on after this. At first I thought he was just like a dumb jock because like he's like a square jawed, like this guy's a Chad. He's like 6'10", square jawed, forward. He's a gamer too, which is Chad as fuck also. But at first I thought he was just like low IQ grug man. Well, then I did a little bit more research and I remembered he was the only player on his team during the George Floyd riot time that wouldn't take a knee during the national anthem.
That's probably why they're attacking him, honestly.
There's a very based picture of him surrounded by his teammates locking arms during the I think it was March or April after Floyd, when they were all kneeling and all had the equality, and he was the only one that wouldn't kneel. He has a military background in his family. that was incredibly interesting to me, and it kind of tells me he might have known what he was saying, but who knows?
Yeah, that's true too. But we're gonna unfortunately have to cut it short and end there. I have to go to work, but we actually only covered one topic that we wanted to cover, which is pretty funny.
It's because it flowed so naturally.
Yeah, that's crazy because we know how to dissent, but optically. And so all right, so we'll pick up on the next episode of what is it called? Optical Dissent.
Optical Dissent.
Optical Dissent.
Let's do it.
So funny. If you're watching it on my channel, obviously you could find everywhere. You could find Jordan in the description. I'm sure he'll put the same thing in his. Till next time, see you guys later. You have anything else you want to leave them with?
Nope, I'm good, man. Good talk. Good chat.
Good talk,
Talk to you later, man.
See you guys later.